welcome back, guys, from our well-deserved lunch break. Maybe you have noticed there is a little present on your seats. It's from our Ministry of Justice, Public Administration, and Digital Transformation. And from what I understood, it's a reader for your personal IDs. So just grab it and take it with you. Okay, so the next one on stage is someone who began his entrepreneurial career straight out of university at the age of 22. How impressive, Adam. This braveness deserves a great applause. Let's welcome with me Adam Silverman, CEO of Agent Ops AI, with his speech about building enterprise-grade AI agents.
Cool. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I want to say a big shout out to the Crow AI team for bringing me from New York to actually come and pitch here. It's been great getting to see the city, to work with the Crow AI team. I'm really excited for years to come as this kind of tradition continues. I'll give you a bit of background on myself before I jump into everything. I'm the founder of Agent Ops. We are a company that does observability, monitoring, and compliance for AI agents. So that's a good place to kind of jump into. Has anyone heard of AI agents before? Maybe let's do a raise of hands. Oh, sweet. Okay. Way more than I thought. That's great. So I'll run through then a bunch of the things in terms of like explaining them quite quickly so that I can get to some actionable steps on actually how to build these great agents. Quick thing I would just want to run by. The way to think about AI agents is similar to autonomous cars. So in San Francisco, we have these cars that drive everywhere completely autonomously. And the way we think about these AI agents is actually autonomous pieces of software. So think you give it an input and it can do a full end-to-end workflow completely just through natural language or sometimes through some prompting. So an example of this is we work with a hedge fund. They asked to write an investment memo in Apple, just that simple kind of brief, and it'll go to Bloomberg, it'll reference information, it'll go do analysis within Excel, it'll go write a memo within Microsoft Word, and then finally it'll actually email that brief to the C-suite at this hedge fund. In terms of like where this industry is going, Goldman Sachs reported that over 1/4 of tasks can be automated by AI. So there's a lot of tasks that everyone does in their workflows every day that we're confident can actually be automated with these AI agents. There's only one issue though. My team, we actually tried over 400 agents, and the reality is a lot of them suck. It's really hard to get reliable outputs consistently from these agents, and that's what we're solving here at Agent Ops. We're agent developers. We scoured the internet, basically interviewing all the top agent developers, and a lot of them felt the same way. They were trying out different agentic frameworks like AutoGPT, CrewAI, AutoGen, and they were really struggling trying to get reliable output to see where they were succeeding, where they were failing, and actually how they could adopt them within their business. So we actually started building agents March 2023, and that's when we realized that there's actually really like a lack of monitoring and ways to actually understand where your agents are succeeding and failing. The one thing I'd like to note on this slide is we actually have over 60 agents working for our team right now. So we're a very, very lean team. We have agents in everything from like sales to marketing to customer service, and those are some of the things we'll kind of jump into a bit later. So basically, development right now is a black box for these agent developers. They lack reliability required to actually get widespread adoption across entire organizations. And then from a compliance perspective, they don't necessarily have the monitoring right now to actually understand where their agents are succeeding and failing. So what we built is basically in 3 lines of code, you can implement Agent Ops. You can actually see where your agent's succeeding. You can debug your agent. You can monitor it. And then you can actually benchmark it across a variety of different agents. So I'll talk about that a bit more. But typically, this is what it looks like, developers on the left side. How many developers are there in the room? Maybe we could put, oh, amazing. I love Croatia because of that. On the left side is kind of what it looks like when you're developing one of these agents. And with Agent Ops, you actually get a full, it's a DevOps platform to actually understand where agents are succeeding, where they're failing. And from a compliance perspective, you can actually audit the agents to see exactly, basically, where data is going into the agent, where from a data management perspective, what database it has access to, what website it visits. So in the same way that banks basically monitor their human employees, we have software you can actually monitor your AI agents. And it's really, really easy to implement. And it's basically the necessary piece that's bridging the gap for a lot of these developers to actually bring their agents into production across their entire organization. So one question I want to ask, maybe we'll get a bit more interactive, but how long do you think it would take to write a 500-word investment memo in Apple? I don't know, someone from the crowd. 2 hours? Oh, come on. Maybe in Croatia. In the US, maybe about 30 minutes. They work really fast down there. But I'll just show you this. So this is basically one of the agents that we've built and we work directly with. And basically this, basically in under a minute, I can give it a stock ticker, and it can actually build full end-to-end investor research. It can actually reference where all this data is coming from. You can see who initiated the agent, what data source it had access to. So this is just like one example of many in terms of like banks and big consulting firms and large corporations are using these agents today, and they're actually making a huge, huge, huge difference in terms of their productivity. This is a task that in reality would take probably 20 to 30 minutes to do properly end-to-end, and in this like short demo, we did this entire investor memo super quickly. In terms of like our full ecosystem, and then I'm going to jump into a bunch of tips on how to build out these reliable agents. So we do have an SDK. It's publicly available. You can go on GitHub. You can use it right away for free. We also are building an agent marketplace right now. So we work with, we've tested over 400 of the top agents. We know what works. We know what doesn't. So we work with a lot of top consulting firms, actually advising them on what agents they should bring forward to their customers, what tech stack is actually best to automate a lot of the tasks that they're working on. And from our perspective, we are very big on having 1 billion people use agents in the coming years. So our goal is to basically educate as many people as possible on agents, where the kind of limitations are. We'll get into that a bit later. But really just trying to figure out what you can actually put into your company within 6 hours and actually start driving real organizational change. I'll fly through this. This is just kind of a quick breakdown, how our business works. Like I said, it's totally free to get started. We do work with, when we're working with large enterprises, we're going and deploying on-prem or on their own servers. We'll go basically on their GCP, their Azure, their AWS, so it's completely secure. And this is one of the factors that's kind of allowing us to work with a lot of governmental organizations, big banks, Fortune 500 companies, et cetera. Okay, so basically I want to, this is something that we find banks really like, is that they want to actually understand the full software development lifecycle, and that's kind of where AgentOps comes into play. So like I said, it's very easy to install AgentOps in 3 lines of code. You basically can prototype your agents really, really easily. You can basically understand the full architecture design of what data they've access to, where they're succeeding, where they're failing. When it comes to dev quality iterations, we actually have a test suite built inside our platform, so you can actually evaluate your agents to see where they're succeeding, where they're failing, what data they've access to. And then the last, we actually help on productionizing apps. So one big thing that we realized, we talked to a lot of consulting firms, and around 20% of their deployments in the Gen AI space are only going into production. So there's 80% of projects that are basically thousands of developer hours are going into, and they're not reliable enough to actually reach enterprise-grade adoption. And that's one of the things we're bridging the gap with here at AgentOps. In terms of case studies and use cases, so I think it's good to understand that when people think about agents, they think about voice agents or maybe chatbots, but there's really a lot more to it. So we have co-pilots, and there's kind of examples across all of these. The ones that we like to focus on is really the AI co-pilots, the chatbots, and the fully autonomous agents. So you just give it a single task, and it can just go and execute tasks end to end. We are partnered with something like the top companies in the space, so I don't know, the logos aren't showing up well, but Microsoft AutoGen, we're partnered with CrewAI, Cohere, OpenPipe, and a bunch of other companies. And the goal is that basically any type of agent that you develop, we're totally agent agnostic, we're LLM agnostic, and we can basically work with anybody. This is something that I think is interesting and maybe to even bring back to your team. So if there's one slide that if you're an engineering manager in the room, this is the one to take a picture of. But this is basically a full breakdown of how we think about agents, and these are all the data points that we actually capture. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with LLM observability, but LLM observability kind of stops at just what the LLMs are doing. We like to think about agents as the full end-to-end process. So who initiated the agent, what data did the agent have access to, what websites did it visit, and basically everything end-to-end. We do have basically all these data points we're tracking within AgentOps. And the way that we think about these agents is they have an LLM at their core, but they need to have access to existing context, to memory, to different tools and functions, and that's what makes these agents so powerful. And getting from a compliance and auditability perspective, being able to see everything along this entire spectrum is super, super necessary when these banks and big organizations start actually productionizing these agents. And this, I'm happy to kind of send this out later, but just kind of goes a bit deeper into kind of all the things I talked about. But basically what customers are using our agents for today, so banks are analyzing quarterly reports, they're listening to quarterly calls and actually in real time transcribing the calls and going to the agent to actually reference data points from Bloomberg, S&P, and Gartner. We work with sales teams to actually basically do data enrichment. So you can say, I want to find every manufacturing company in Slovenia, and it could go out and actually find all those leads for you. So it's really, really cool to kind of see how these agents are automating like a lot of the boring work that people do as part of their jobs, and actually making their jobs a lot more enjoyable. So here, I'll show you a couple things. In terms of like the productivity gain, potentially, with agents, we're looking at over $18 trillion in productivity gain, which is awesome to see. 70% of human service inquiries can actually be automated. So we work with a lot of companies on the customer experience side and customer support side. And they are just basically, they're repurposing their customer support team. So instead of dealing with support complaints all day, they're actually going and making like actionable change in the company, or maybe working directly on the product team, because now a lot of their basic level support has been fully automated, which is cool to see. So think about like password resets, anything having to do with like pulling data from your account, maybe changing your flight is some of the companies we're working with. But really like anything that is like a customer support representative you used to have to get on a phone or get onto a chatbot to do, the large majority of these tasks can be fully automated now, which is really cool to see. This is kind of like where we see where it's going, but a couple things I want to get into. So I want to make this as actionable as possible. I want you guys to go away with some key takeaways. So one thing is I want to go into like how do you actually build these enterprise-grade agents? If you guys are working at companies now, how you can actually be the innovators, how you can actually bring some of this stuff to the table. So my first thing is just being early adopter. I think a lot of people ask me, they're like, is my job going to get automated with AI? Am I going to have a job in 5 years from now? I think the biggest thing I can recommend doing is actually leaning into this technology. So after during questions, I'm happy to recommend some agents. I'll be around after. But I think if you can be the one at your company who brings this forward to leadership, who says like, hey, we need to figure out these automations. Our team is doing these processes time and time again. Like, is there a way for us to actually go and automate these tasks? That is one of the best places you can really start off from. I say like lean into it as much as possible. There's a term called like the Luddites, and there was a basically there's in the turn of the century there's basically these loomers who basically were trying to like automate like a steam-powered looming machine. And there's these people who end up, instead of like adopting the technology, they went and broke the machines. And I think there's a lot of people who I speak with and a lot of companies who are kind of scared of AI. They're like, this is going to take our jobs. This is going to replace my function. And I'll say like, working in agents every day, it's not going to replace your job, but there's parts of your job that can be fully automated. So I'd really lean in there, try and figure out the parts of your job that you think can actually be fully automated end to end. I think another big thing from our partners over at Crew AI is don't wait for other people's use cases. So if you see something at your bank or whatever organization you work for, really think about like, can we automate this process? Is there something that we can be doing so that we don't have to be spending time trying to actually, doing tasks that robots are actually inherently better at doing? And that's one thing I really recommend everyone to lean in on. One thing that we look at is just when we start talking to companies and consulting firms is look for like kind of the low risk and high impact automations that you can do. So what is like the lowest risk task? That's usually where customer support or something comes in where if there is some margin of error, you're not necessarily going to be in a position where the company's going to go bankrupt or get sued or be liable for something. So really think about these things that can actually be high impact, that are maybe taking a lot of hours from your team's time, and try and figure out ways to automate those. One big thing I recommend is make sure automations are even possible. So to be fully frank, a lot of companies come to us and they want AGI, or artificial general intelligence. They truly want like fully autonomous employees that can just act completely on behalf of the company. And the reality is we're not there yet. We're so far from AGI, and like that's my 2 cents. I really think through, how can you actually create an automation is you first have to understand the process end to end. So what I recommend doing is I have just a simple notepad that I keep on my desk. And every time I do a process that I think can be automated, I write it down within this notepad. And what ends up happening is that now I have like a list of all these tasks that I think can actually be fully automated. And I say like, if before you even think about automating a process, do it manually at least 10 times. Make sure that you have like a detailed breakdown. Make sure you understand any variation as part of that process. And that's really, really essential to actually start building out these like really reliable workflows that can be really released enterprise-wide. So this is kind of like, I'm happy to kind of share these slides after, but I really think like writing it down, understanding the whole process is like one of the most important steps. And oftentimes when people come to us with these AGI type ideas, this is the thing that really grounds them in reality of like what's actually possible. One thing I recommend as well is like building for scale from day zero. So a lot of companies come to us, they've built out these prototypes, they're trying to get buy-in from their team in terms of, can we release this? Is this something that is actually gonna work enterprise-wide? And what happens is that from day zero, they're not thinking about observability, they're not thinking about monitoring, they're not thinking about compliance. And these are all things that we help with at AgentOps, but there's also a lot of other ways to build these into your pipelines initially. So I would think through, is there a way for you to actually, think about scale from day zero. Obviously, you want to first start off with a prototype before you go invest millions of dollars into building out these agents reliably. But I think it's really important to kind of think through this and see what the possibilities are, and actually understand from your team what the requirements are to actually, if you are going to go do a widespread deployment, are there any checkboxes you kind of need to check off to make sure you can actually get this, bought in from the CEO or the CIO or CTO at your company. Here's just kind of some quick facts on where we're at. So we basically have over 1,000 users who are paying for our product every month, and these are mainly like large teams. We have 200% month-over-month growth, which is great. We're working on a bunch with like some of the top agent developers in the space, so always kind of happy to chat through that after. We run the largest community in San Francisco in regards to AI agents. A couple other things is we recently announced like $2.6 million in funding, so we are actively hiring. So if any engineers are in the room, like definitely like let me know. Or if you have friends that are engineers and are trying to like find remote work, we're always hiring. And yeah, like I'll probably take it. Here's my information, and let's jump into some questions. Thank you, everyone.